Hello Internet, my name is Mitchell and this is a video. Welcome to our very first how to build a front-end web application using Vue.js from scratch series. There's going to be a lot of awesome episodes in this series, and today we're going to be getting set up in the very first episode with Vue. We're going to be starting a project, we're going to be starting a Git repository, we're going to be initializing our Vue project, and by the end you will be able to go to a locally hosted website on your computer and see your project live and make small changes. Yeah, you're going to be able to have a full project done by the end of this episode. So that's awesome. Also, just a heads up, as I'm recording this, I believe I will be eventually doing a back-end series to complement this front-end series, so you guys will be able to follow both and build a full-stack application. Depending on what time you're watching this in the future, this may already be around, so definitely go check out the rest of my channel to see if that's something that's already around. And then you can do both front-end and back-end simultaneously and build a full web application with a database and front-end and everything. So definitely keep that in mind. As well, with this application, we're going to be using Vue 3. Now, as I'm recording this, Vue 3 is still in its final stages of beta, which means it's pretty much any day now going to be fully released, but they're still working on the last tiny little bugs. So you will see as we install Vue and use tools like Vue CLI, we're going to be including an @next sort of tag with it, which basically is saying, hey, we want to install Vue, but we want to install the beta version of it. Now, depending again on what time you're watching this series, that may be unnecessary. Check the description below to see if anything's changed, or just use your better intuition. Is Vue 3 fully released? Cool, then you probably don't need to use the @next sort of tag that we're going to be using when we install certain packages. Just keep that one in mind as well. Cool, so let's get started with what is front-end development in the first place. Front-end development is basically utilizing three very important things. I would say languages, but they're not actually technically languages, not all of them. So we're going to be using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You're going to be hearing those three tools a lot when it comes to front-end development. That's pretty much all it is those three things. HTML, if you're not familiar, is the structure of a website. It's like the skeleton of how everything fits on top of each other. The CSS is the styling, so it's like how the website looks, the different colors, the different sizes, everything in terms of the aesthetic of the website. And then JavaScript makes everything look and run cool. It makes things move around, and it does all the cool, more programmy features. JavaScript is the actual code, and HTML and CSS are sort of different from that, but JavaScript is real programming, coding language, so that's where you get to do all the cool stuff. Now, also going into what Vue is a framework that's built with JavaScript. You don't need to know too much about the differences between a framework and a language and a library. I know it can get all confusing. I remember it was very confusing for me when I started out. All you need to know is Vue is a framework. In a sense, it's like a tool that we're using. We're going to be using JavaScript to write code inside the Vue framework, but you don't really need to try and understand it too much further than that. We're also, as I mentioned before, going to be using Vue 3 for this entire tutorial, as it's the latest, more feature-rich version of Vue. It should also run better, and we're also just setting ourselves up for the future. We want to make sure that we are learning the technology that's going to be used in a year from now, and not something that we're going to have to update all of our knowledge again because everyone's adapting into the new version. So we're going to be learning Vue 3. It is in its final stages of beta, so things may change by the time you watch this, but it should all roughly make sense, and anything that's changed should be easy to navigate whenever you're watching this in the future. Awesome, now that we have a brief understanding of what front-end development is and what Vue is, and Vue 3 a little bit, we now have to get into the installation of everything. So I say everything, it sounds like it's a lot, it's not, but we're going to be starting off with Node.js. Node is pretty much the engine that runs all of the cool front-end stuff that we do. You don't need to know any more than that. We're going to keep it really short and concise because I have a habit of just rambling on and on, so I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible. So yeah, just come to the Node website and install either the recommended version or the latest version. Both should actually work. I typically go with the latest version just because I'm a developer and I like new features, but if you're a beginner, you may want to go with the recommended version just to make sure that there's nothing unexpected with your working environment. But both should work for the purposes of this tutorial, and if you're watching in the future, they may show different different versions. As long as you have a version of Node, especially one that's past, version 10 or 12, you should be completely fine. There shouldn't be any issues. Awesome, so just download the installer and run it. Go through the installation process, something I'm sure you've done a million times over with multiple programs before. And once you've got it installed, it's basically just sitting on your computer and you don't have to really worry about it again. Vue and potentially other front-end stuff that you're doing will run Node commands by themselves, but as long as you have Node installed on your device, everything should run as expected. This will also install something called Node Package Manager, which allows you to run npm commands, and we're going to go into that a little bit later to be installing new libraries and sort of new programs. We're going to be able to install them with npm. Moving on, we have the Git and GitHub part of this video. So very quick explanation for Git and GitHub. Obviously, I can make a video on this in the future to explain a little bit further, but Git and GitHub are different if you're new to Git and stuff like that. First up, they are different. GitHub is a service that provides tools basically to use Git in a much more user-friendly way. Git itself is a tool for version control, so it allows you to save your code, to commit different versions of your code, and do a bunch more advanced cool tricks past that. And GitHub is just, it's a website for you to store that code, to store your projects, to make changes, to bring other people into your code, stuff like that. For the purpose of this video, we're going to be signing up to GitHub. We're going to be creating a Git repository. So it's basically just a project. We're going to be creating a project for our project, and then we're going to be saving our code to make sure that it always sort of exists somewhere and we never lose our code and we can download it on different devices. So first of all, I want you to go to github.com, something I'm sure you've heard of before. Just go to github.com, sign up for an account. It's very straightforward, and confirm your email, do whatever they ask you to do. And then once you've signed into your account, you should be roughly here. And at the top right, it says, it's a little plus sign. Click new repository and you get to this page where you can create a new repository. Now we're going to be, for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to be creating a Twitter clone, just because it gives us a lot of flexibility. It's very simple on the surface, but we have a lot of extra functionality we can add down the line as we want to explore new features and new capabilities. So the name of my repository is going to be called Twitter. It says it already exists because I've already created it, and also just add a description, say whatever you want, say this is a test project for Mitch or Romney's tutorial on YouTube, or the Earth is Squares tutorial on YouTube, and or just make an actual project that you want to be working on, and try and adapt the advice I'm giving for this Twitter clone to your project. Mine's going to be public. It'll be in the description down below if you want to go check it out. And we don't need a README. We don't need a git ignore. We don't need to worry about a license. Once you create that, so just click the create repository button and you should be all good. Once you've created that, then I want you to go to Google GitHub Desktop and download that. So GitHub Desktop is a program that allows you to access your repository on your computer, and make changes and commit new code and bring in your new code and all of the cool stuff. And it does it in a very user-friendly way. There are more advanced tools out there that we're not going to be going into, but GitHub Desktop is very good for beginners, and has pretty much everything you're going to need. So download that. Once you download GitHub Desktop, you should be brought into this sort of view. I think you have to log into the program, like log in with your GitHub account, and then you should be brought to this view where you can add your first repository to GitHub Desktop. We're gonna search for Twitter, and you search for whatever you named your repository when you created it just before, and we're gonna clone it. Cloning it is just downloading that repository to your computer. And sorry, as I did that very quickly, there is a destination folder for that repository. Make a little bit of note of that because you're going to need to know where that is for us to make changes later on. Cool, so you should be brought to this view. When you make changes to code, it'll show up in this changed files area. We're not going to go into this too much. Again, this is more about getting you set up for your project, and a lot of this learning will come from exploring what you've set up alongside me today. But yeah, this is where all of your code will show up when you change it, and then you can save it to your repository. Awesome. Now the next step assumes that you already have a code editor or an IDE. If you don't, I recommend looking up either Atom or VS Code. Both of these are free and quite beginner friendly. VS Code is probably where you're going to end up, even if you start using Atom. It is the most popular IDE as far as I'm aware, and it's used with beginners and advanced users alike. I'm actually using a different program, and the reason I don't recommend this necessarily is because it's paid. This is called WebStorm. Yeah, I do a lot of front-end development, personal projects, full-time job, so I paid for a license to use this program. It is good if you want to use it. It is a little bit more intensive than the other apps. It's less lightweight, so if your computer is not that good, if your laptop is not that good, you're going to struggle to run it without lagging a little bit. Luckily, I have a very decked out MacBook, so it tends to run fine. But yeah, the mix of it being paid for and it being a bit intensive is why I don't normally recommend it, especially for beginners in a tutorial. Open up your IDE, either Atom or VS Code, and open up the project repository that you've just cloned from GitHub. So mine is in a folder I called Git. I think GitHub, if you didn't really touch any of the settings, automatically saves to your document folder. So documents/GitHub/ whatever the repository name is called. And open that up and you should be in sort of a blank view. There's no files in that folder yet. So we're going to be setting up our Vue project now. And luckily, Vue has a way to do this that pretty much sets up an entire project for you without you having to do very much at all. So we're going to open up our terminal here. I've got a terminal that's automatically integrated into my IDE. VS Code and Atom both have plugins that you can just add a terminal to your IDE. Otherwise, open the terminal if you're on Mac, the terminal program, just search for it, or the command prompt program on Windows. Once you've got that open, all I need you to do is write npm. So this is something that would be installed when we installed Node, right? npm, and then it is install -g. Now G just means global. It means instead of installing it to the folder we're in right now, we want to install it on the entire device. And the reason we're doing that is because we're going to be installing the Vue/CLI at next. At Vue/CLI at next. This is going to give us the Vue CLI, and at next is just a tag that means we want to use the latest beta version because we're going to be working with Vue 3 and it's still in its final stages of beta. Once we run that, it'll run a bunch of commands and grab all the files necessary. Because I already have this installed on my laptop, it may happen a bit faster than it does for you. Don't worry, it's just making sure everything's installed and everything that we need is necessary and available to us. Cool, once that's installed, you should get a message pretty similar to this that just says plus at Vue CLI. The version right now is 4.5.2. That may change depending on when you're watching this video. And once that has been installed globally on our computer, we can then run a command called Vue UI. And this is a really awesome command because it'll create a web server for us. And that web server will give us a bunch of tools to make it really easy to run our application. When you run Vue UI, you should get to, it wouldn't actually be this view, it would be more similar to this view. Because I've already done this in advance, it's showing a little bit different, but I'm gonna go through this process with you now. So you'll get to the Vue project manager, and you wanna go to create. You wanna be creating a new Vue project. Go to the folder that you've cloned it. It'll normally be in documents/GitHub. Mine is in my personal Mitchell Romney user, and then into the Git folder. And then here we have Twitter. I'm going to create a new project here. And we're just going to name it the same thing, Twitter. Obviously, we're creating a folder in a folder right now, and we'll fix that up a little bit later. Use the default package manager, which should be npm. We're not going to initiate a Git repository because we've already done that. And I think we'll even say, I don't think overwrite matters in this context here. So we're going to go next. Just use the default, we want to use the default preset for Vue 3. Make sure if anything comes up between Vue 2 and Vue 3, we're going to be doing everything in Vue 3 to set you guys up for the future of the framework. So create a project with that. This may take a little while. Just let it install everything. It's installing plugins and libraries necessary to run everything. It's also setting up folders, files. It's getting the whole project structure set up automatically for you, so you don't really have to do anything. Awesome. Now, when that process is finally finished, for me, it took a few minutes. It may take longer or shorter depending on your setup, basically. But you should get to a project dashboard. This is really awesome. Clear that little message. And this gives you a bunch of way easier ways to just like click and do things and without having to write any commands, especially that may be confusing if you're just starting out. Before we run the server though, there's one last thing. It does say it up here. I'm not really sure where that takes you 100%. And because I'm currently, we're sort of experimenting with the beta Vue 3, we are going to go to the Vue Dev Tools releases link to get the beta of Vue Dev Tools. Now, Vue Dev Tools is basically just something that it's a plugin for your browser that inside your browser Dev Tools here, it'll add an extra tab. And this will basically just say Vue. It'll have a little Vue icon and allow you to investigate your Vue web page in much more detail and see a lot more, which is really awesome. It's pretty important to developing with Vue. It gives you way more information than you would get without it. So definitely I recommend installing it. If you use Chrome, just install it using the Chrome Web Store. If you have Firefox, all you have to do is click this link and it'll basically install it into your browser from there. So even though I think the Firefox one looks a little bit more complicated because it's not on the Web Store, it is actually way quicker and way easier. So whatever you use, just get it from here, make sure it's installed. And we're not going to be using this tutorial, but it's important to set up, and I thought it would be important for our installation and setup sort of part of this entire series. So definitely get the Vue Dev Tools, very important. Awesome. So now we're ready to finally run the web server. So in your project, you should have this view. It should say the project name that you called it, the repository and everything. You'll have all these different things. You don't really need to worry about these right now. We will use things like dependencies and probably plugins later on to install other things that we will need for our Vue application, but not this episode. Today, all we're going to be doing is running the server. Now, you have two different ways of running it, really. Well, one real way of running it for development, that is called serve. Serve says compiles and hot reloads for development. This is basically, hot reloads is just when you make changes locally, when you make changes to the code, the web page will automatically update and show you those new changes. So it's very good for development. It's not compiled in a way that is efficient for production. So that's why you have another one called build. And when we get into a part of the tutorial for deploying to production, this is the command that's going to be run before the website sort of goes live. It's going to build a much more efficient version of the project. But we don't need to worry about that for now. So right now we're going to go to serve and we're just going to run the task. This runs the Vue CLI serve command. It's very straightforward, and then you should say done. You should just say done. It's all running. Now you go, okay, but what now? What's running? Where is it? How is anything working? So what we're going to do is go to localhost 8080, localhost : 8080. Now this means that we're going to the local server the same way that our Vue UI is running on localhost 8000. That just means it's running locally on our computer. No one else can see it. It's just running on our computer, and it's running on the port called 8000. There's thousands of ports for different programs to be running locally at different times. So this is running on port 8000, and you can make the default for your website to be served to is port 8080. So if you go to 8080, you should hopefully see this. If your app is running, you should go to port 8080 and you'll be able to see this page. And this is your website. This is the default Vue sort of application that is installed with the CLI, and it may look like nothing, or it may look like something, a different web page, or something a little bit more confusing. So what we're going to do really quickly before we end this episode is get our hands on it. So here in the app, we're not going to go into the specifics of Vue and how the templating works and everything today. That's going to be for probably the next episode. But all we're going to do is I'm going to show you a way to interact, just so you can see that the website is live and that it's reacting based on the code. And you can sort of explore this a little bit before you go any further. So what we're going to do here is see this hello world. This is what's called a component right here. This has more code somewhere else. We're not going to go into that too much today. But it has a little message prop is what it's called. This little message here, welcome to your Vue.js app. And if you look at this page, that is the text that is right here. So very quickly you can see what is here is showing up right here. So what we can do is we can change this to welcome to Twitter, maybe a little exclamation mark. And it changes the page automatically. This is what hot reload means. It means the second we kind of change the code, it will update the website automatically for us. We don't have to refresh, we don't have to do anything. And that's awesome. And now you can see that the code is running, the code is working. We have a project, we can type blah, 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 blah. We can type a bunch of stuff and it'll actually show up on the site down here. We're gonna go a little bit more into the structure and components and how things sort of work a little bit more detailed in coming episodes. But hopefully this excites you guys with working with a web server. You now have a full web app up and running in a sense. And we get to now build onto it and build a lot more cooler stuff. So the final step before I wrap up this episode is going to be saving this code to our repository. That was the whole point we made it, is to make sure that our code is saved and not lost. So I'm going to remove this little change I made there, and then we're going to open GitHub desktop. And you'll see here we have all of these files. Now, because I'm working with WebStorm actually creates these extra files. Normally we would ignore these with Git, and that's something I don't want to do that now because I don't want to overwhelm you with the different parts of how Git works, so I'm just going to untick those for now. But then we have all of these. So these are all the files that Vue CLI created for us, and this is basically our application. So what all we want to do here is write a name for this save. We're going to say initialize application. That's what all of these files mean, is we've pretty much created the application for the first time. You can write a description if you want. On personal projects, I tend to just not bother because I'm the only one looking at it. When I'm working on a full team of developers, it is useful to write a description and be a little bit more detailed and methodical with how you do these sort of things. But when you're working by yourself, you can pretty much make all the rules. So we're going to commit this. Again, you don't need to try and understand too much. If you want to look more into Git, I definitely think that's a great idea, but we may go into that in the future anyway. But yeah, commit to master, it's just committing, it's saving it. And then the last step you want to do is to publish the branch. That basically means you're only going to end up doing this once, unless you're doing more technical stuff down the line, you're making more branches, but you're only going to do this step once for now. And this is basically, we are publishing, this is the first instance of our code. So that's going to push that basically to where the code lives, which is on GitHub. And then once it's done, it's done. We can go to GitHub now and take a look at the code that's being saved. So as you can see here, I've just gone to the repository that we created in the start called Twitter. Oh, I did make one mistake actually, and normally I don't do this. This is not how I save my projects. But if you see here, we created a Twitter folder inside the Twitter folder, and that's just unnecessary. So normally I would copy all of this. If I do end up making this mistake, which is a normal mistake to make at the start of a project, is for the folders to be a little bit unnecessary or out of sync or something. WebStorm likes to check every piece of code before it moves everything. So that takes a little while unnecessarily. Then some reason it opens up all these files that aren't necessary either, but we just delete that folder. And this would realistically be what your root folder should look like. You have source, which is all your source code, all this extra stuff. But yeah, this is the code for your application has now been saved. It is saved, it's done, it's there, it's live, sort of in GitHub, and you can clone this to different computers. And we're going to continually be committing new changes as we go through the series. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You guys have a live website up. Hopefully you have a GitHub account and a GitHub repo with your code changes saved. You now have a very basic understanding of Vue and maybe even Node, HTML, CSS. These are all very basic stuff we're going to be going more and more into as the tutorial goes on. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this helped you guys out. Don't forget to obviously like the video if you liked the video, leave a comment if you're getting confused, if you have a question, if you have a suggestion of what you'd like to see, if you're getting any errors, stuff like that, definitely leave it down below. And subscribe if you want to see more tutorials. As I said, I'm going to be doing a back-end tutorial at some point. Obviously, this front-end tutorial is going to have many episodes covering a bunch of awesome, cool features and get more advanced as we move forward. So definitely subscribe if you're interested in catching any of that when it releases. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next video.